Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations Podcast. I have one question and one question for you only. Are you morbid? Ladies and gentlemen, it is with absolute honor and privilege to welcome my guest to today's episode. He is none other than Mr. Tom G. Warrior. I'm very psyched about this one. I've been looking forward to sharing this with you guys for quite some time, and I have to say the conversation that I had the honor of having with Tom was absolutely tremendous. There's not much introduction that's really necessary. What I can perhaps say is the fact that when we talk about extreme music, the existence of such a thing and such a culture is not entirely possible unless for the legacies of entities such as CELTIC FROST and HELLHAMMER. And the traces of that are evident throughout the evolution of the style of music, which we all, of course, love and cherish. And I think that this conversation in particular is one that I think that for a lot of you diehards out there, it's a special treat because we got to talk a lot about what happened to a lot of the music that actually Tom wrote with Martin Eric Ain, the late, great Martin Eric Ain. And we got to talk a lot about that, you know, certain songs that didn't make it to Monotheist and so on. We got to talk about Monotheist itself, you know, I think one of the greatest return albums in heavy metal history, if you ask me. And we got to talk about a lot of very, very special things about Tom's relationship with H.R. Giger, and if we'll be seeing more of his work used in future Triptykon releases. So lots of very important questions which will be answered shortly. And on top of this, of course, in great Iblis Manifestations fashion, the conversation actually starts mainly just talking about a lot of very personal takes on things. And Tom has, of course, been a very outspoken person for many years. You get to see a lot of those internal sentiments that reflect upon the world, you know, and what even drives him to make the music that he does. And, you know, it's a very personal, it's very in-depth and very detailed conversation. So shortly will be coming my chat with Mr. Tom G. Warrior. If you are new to the Iblis Manifestations podcast, well, first of all, welcome to our channel. We tend to have long-format conversations with a variety of different artists and personalities, predominantly from the underground scene and those of the underground alternative cultures, of course, mainly around heavy metal. And yeah, if that's something that interests you, then of course feel free to check out the rest of the episodes once you're finished with this one. And do please consider pressing the subscribe button. I know that's such a cliche thing, but it really helps the channel a lot, you know? It really helps me be able to grow what we're doing here and have bigger and better conversations with a variety of different guests. Although the conversations on Iblis Manifestations aren't always necessarily just about music or what influences someone, but we actually get to talk about a lot of personal anecdotes. We get to really see the side of the artists in these conversations that you don't always see in a 10-minute interview. So it's a different style, you know. It's not for everyone. I appreciate that, but there is value in it. Okay. And before we go into the episode, I wanted to quickly bring your attention to the fact that my band TRIVAX, which originally came and formed in Iran, as I did, we recently put out a new record called Eloah Burns Out. And this album came out via the UK publishing house Colt Never Dies around September last year, on the 29th of September to be precise. And if you've never heard it, you can go check it out, or you can just go watch the latest videos of the band on YouTube. You can search for either the song Azrael or the latest video that we did for a song called Against All Opposition. This is actually in line with the Iranian resistance against the Islamic Republic. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, and if you like your black and death metal straight to the fucking point and straight for the throat, then you may enjoy what TRIVAX has to offer. With that said, for the record, I would also really like to thank Tom for his time and for joining me on this podcast. We truly made a special episode here, you know, and I would also like to send a big shout out to their manager Miles, as well as his partner Kathy, for their help and cooperation, and of course their never-ending support. And also, to any of you who are in the UK, Triptykon will be performing at the Fortress Festival in Scarborough, and that is taking place on the very first weekend of June. I don't think they have many passes left, and the festival's close to selling out, and perhaps by the time this episode comes out, it might be sold out, so be sure to check them out. And I look forward to also meeting some of you there, as I'll be present there myself. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, that's the wrap up for the introduction for this episode. I am very stoked to share this one with you guys, and I hope you'll enjoy it. So, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tom G. Warrior to Iblis Manifestations. Okay then, Mr. Tom G. Warrior, sir, welcome to Iblis Manifestations. I have been anticipating this one greatly for an endless number of reasons, but thank you so much for joining me here on this evening. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, and you know that makes two of us, and I really mean this. I respect you deeply, and it's an honor to be here.
I very much appreciate that, sir. That respect is very much mutual. You know, I've followed your work and listened to what you've done for so many years, and you know, the influence not just on myself, but I think the entirety of this art form is you know, is unquestionable. So so I'm very excited for this one. I think it's a real treat for all of the listeners of Iblis Manifestations, as well as followers of yourself. I think I guess one spot that we can kind of start this conversation on and then sort of see where it goes off to is, first of all, it was fantastic meeting yourself and the wonderful Kathy at the UK Death Fest down in London just about a year and a half ago or so. You kindly had us present at your sound check, you know, and I gotta say, man, that whole show and what you're doing with Triumph of Death, I think is so fucking special. And it's so cool to see those songs live. You know, it's one of them things you never think it's gonna happen, and then you see it, and then it sounds even better than you expected it would. So yeah, I mean, what a hell of an experience. I mean, how has that whole thing been for you, and sort of jumping back into the saddle for those songs and doing those Triumph of Death shows?
Well, I myself didn't think that I would ever see this happen, going to what you just said. And I take nothing for granted. in March 2024, it was 43 years since I started playing an instrument. So that's a very long path, and I've learned to take nothing for granted. And as many know, I myself have my reservations regarding certain aspects of Hellhammer, certain aspects of the lyrics. But the resurrection of Celtic Frost, and subsequently the many discussions Martin and I had for nights, trying to find our common history and trying to define what is Celtic Frost, what is our roots. I think in the early 2000s that really was the spark for me to look at Hellhammer differently. And when we started rehearsing for the Monotheist album, we played Hellhammer music quite a lot during rehearsals. Unfortunately, the drummer we had at the time didn't really know how to approach these songs. So the original intention was to take these Hellhammer songs on stage with Celtic Frost. But as that was impossible for these reasons, I later told Martin that I intend to still do that, and he had no reservations. So I wanted to try it, and I have to say, by the grace of the audiences that we've had so far, it's been an amazing undertaking. I know the words fun and Hellhammer don't really associate, but actually we've been having so much fun because it's such basic punky music. It's really the essence of heavy metal. When I did something with Celtic Frost, when I do something with Triptykon, there's so much involved with it. There's so much on my shoulders, artistic credibility and expectations and the record company and this and that. But when I play Hellhammer music, you go on stage and it's so pure and so honest. Of course, people might not like it. I'm fine with that, but it's really pure and honest. We go on stage and we play these songs that have like 2 riffs per song. Mm-hmm. And it's just pure energy, like it used to be when we were at the undiscovered rehearsal room stage. And that's why I'm saying it's fun. It's an entirely different universe. And thankfully the audiences, as you saw, for example, in London, the audiences embrace that, and it's a give and take. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the very cool aspects of it is that, I appreciate that you call the project Triumph of Death as opposed to Hellhammer, and everything that you've already explained over numerous interviews. But what I really like about it is the fact that you do get to kind of hear this more of a fresh approach to the songs, at the very least in terms of production is concerned, because that also makes a very big difference. And I think when I was watching it live, because you are so fucking good when it comes to the sonic elements of things, getting the sound and the tone right, and even though the songs are, if I'm not mistaken, in D standard, when you listen live it sounds like it's a lot lower tuning, just because of the type of sound and the sonic element of it that you've got going on, and it's a real treat, I have to say. And what was really surprising to me was the fact that you actually play the song Triumph of Death, so when I saw you, I hadn't looked at any set lists and whatnot, and I know that you actually sort of, I guess, finish some of the shows with, but I was really surprised, because in my head I was like, oh yeah, this one might be too complicated to recreate live, or, just because there's a lot of sort of atmospheric elements to it. But then when you actually did it, and did it so well, it was very impressive, I must say.
Well, it's of course we have to play it. It's basically Hellhammer's signature song. Mm. And if you listen to the song Triumph of Death, you can already hear certain aspects of Celtic Frost, and of course very much certain aspects of what will be Triptykon one day. Mm. So yeah, of course I play it. But of course I'm a human being, and if I were performing every night like it is on the Hellhammer EP, I would ruin my voice. So we're playing some composite of the demo versions and the EP version in order to actually being able to reproduce this repeatedly without me lose my voice eventually. Which is a bit of a compromise, and I don't like compromises, but in this case, I think that's the way to go. And as far as the sound that you mentioned earlier, I always see that people a lot of people underestimate the importance of how you play, your attitude, the way you carry yourself when you play. It's at least as important as your tuning, as your equipment, as your guitar. I said that also in many interviews in the past. I've had people come to the rehearsal room ask me if they could play through my rig with my instrument, and it sounds completely different, even though it's my setup. It's in the attitude, it's in how you play. How much do you mean it? How much of a fanatic are you? How much of a radical are you really? And and I'm going to make myself sound like a dinosaur right now in a modern time, which I, of course, also embrace. We're here with modern technology and everything, and I use that in the studio too. But where I am a dinosaur is I lament a little bit the perfection that is possible nowadays, and that a lot of young musicians embrace. You go and you record directly into the computer, and you have an amp, simulation, and so on, and then you edit until everything's perfect. And then they come to me, the same musicians come to me all the time, say, how do you get your sound? My sound is very old school. It's primitive, but that's why it sounds primitively heavy. And it's in my attitude. I don't caress my guitar. At the end of the concert, I throw my guitar across the stage to the horror of my guitar tech. And that's why my sound sounds the way it does. And I'm sure I could achieve a semblance of that sound on a little practice combo amp. It's really 50% of what you sound like.
What you hear is an extension of your personality.
Yes, and I'm old enough to have been there, at least as a young teenager, when heavy metal was young and still being built up. And at that time, it was a music of rebellion, a music of revolting against structures and mantras and dogmas and teachers and politicians and everything. It was radical. It was a music that screamed, much like punk later did again. And I sometimes miss that a little bit. I of course I look up to bands that are perfect, and a lot of those young bands, I could never play like that technically. They outplay me, and I do have honest respect for that. But what I miss then on the other side is the sense of anarchy, the sense of radicalness, which is the very root of the music that we are talking about right now.
I absolutely fucking love that, because this is exactly, to me, it's the thing that defines this genre to begin with. I don't think it's so much playing techniques or production techniques or whatever. I think at the end of it, it's the core spirit, that, as you put very well, it's that sense of anarchy and just revolt and creating a storm that can change the world. That's the way I look at heavy metal, really. And I think that as far as what you're saying in terms of the sound, I guess, being an extension of that, yes, you are right. Because even with a guitar, the tone isn't just from what electronics you use in an amplifier, although that can certainly have an effect, or what pickups you use, or what wood it is. I think it all starts from the moment that your finger touches the fretboard, how you're holding that fret, how you're picking.
Absolutely. And I'm the first one who have all these possibilities. When we're in the studio and we want to have a certain sound for a certain mood for a song, with Triptykon, for example, of course, we're also experimenting with all kinds of equipment and amp simulation and whatever, until we have the mood that we want. But one should never forget that heavy metal is not, it doesn't comprise only that. Heavy metal is far more than that. Heavy metal is originally an attitude, and it's quite a rude attitude, and that shouldn't be lost when you're sitting on the computer.
It's so fucking cool hearing that. I mean, for me personally, that's my whole spirit. It always has been, even when we were playing shitty rehearsals in the basement in Tehran, Iran, surrounded by egg cases and whatever, that was still the attitude, and it is still that today. But it's even cooler to hear yourself talk about that, considering the fact that you were very much right at the early beginnings of this genre becoming a thing, and yet here we are almost, well, 4 decades later now officially, and you're still carrying that same attitude. I fucking love that. There's a real special thing that I hope people are making notes as they're listening to this there.
Yeah, I certainly carry the same attitude, for better or for worse. My mother would say I never grew up, but I'm fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you like kind of a bit of an open-ended question on that, but just obviously considering how long ago it was, going back to that original bunker, where you guys were doing these HELLHAMMER stuff, and I guess the kind of the emotions or the thoughts or maybe even perhaps the desperation that gave birth to you wanting to perform that music. How does that compare to how you feel now when you're on stage playing those songs, at least from an emotional perspective?
That's a good and difficult question. The thing is, when we were in that wet, mildewing rehearsal room, and I can still smell it 43 years later, it was such a disgusting smell of everything rotting, and if you left a guitar there or a leather jacket, everything would start to mildew. When we were there playing every night, dreaming of a record deal, we wanted to be at that stage where I am now, touring with a professional framework, with a professional concert agent and professional manager and professional crew, and play decent stages and to be perceived by at least some audiences. That's what we were dreaming of. Now I've been at that stage for quite a while, and it's a huge privilege. It's a gift given to me by the audiences, which I never forget. Because I was at that stage where I was dreaming, you know how that is when you're in the underground. You know it. Mm-hmm. But now I'm kind of missing that underground spirit. I'm very privileged that my youth dream has become reality. And I'm endlessly grateful to those who made it a reality, people who listen to my music. But I have to say, knowing both sides, that unfettered spirit of feeling we belong together, a small group of people with the same goal, the same radicalness, that cannot be replicated. No matter how professional, no matter how big the budget, you cannot replicate that. And of course, it's somewhere still inside of me. But I'm missing my comrades from that time. I'm the only survivor from that time. And when I reformed CELTIC FROST with Martin Ain, of course, he was also a survivor from that time. We were very different people, but he understood this because he lived it too, and now he's gone. And I sometimes feel very isolated and lonely on stage. Because I'm playing with fantastic musicians who are all very close friends of mine, and I look up to them. The guitar player of Triptykon is 1,000,000 times better than me, and he's a musical genius. I look up to him. But at the same time, something inside of me misses that punky, rebellious spirit where you come out of a rehearsal after 5 hours and you stink like mildew and sweat. But you think, my God, the new song we wrote, and it's all underground. Only like a handful of people know that you even exist. And it's honest and pure and not driven by expectations or what Metal Hammer writes tomorrow. There again, it's as metal should be. And of course, since this propelled me to where I am, I miss it like crazy. Even though I'm lamenting on a high level, a gift has been given to me. So it's something that you can never resolve. What can I say?
It's very interesting to hear you say that. And by the way, for the record, I do understand that spirit of the underground that you talk about.
I know.
Of course.
I know.
Absolutely.
Kathy has told me a lot about your roots, and of course you also manifested some of it in your video. I know that you understand it, probably much better than I understand it, actually.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure if better. I think it's that the source of it maybe comes from a similar place, But to me,
at the time HELLHAMMER existed, the Swiss government was extremely conservative, and the Swiss government actually at one point elected to go, sent the police after the youth, and they shot rubber bullets into the eyes of the young people who simply wanted to have a youth center in Zurich, my hometown. And it went on for many months. There was like street battles, and that's all fine and dandy. It was quite radical. This was the environment that me and Martin grew up. But in your case, this was a permanent fixture, and on a magnitude that eclipses anything that could have happened in Zurich. So, you know, if anybody understands the plight, and in the face of this, live with that dream and pursue that dream, regardless of all the obstacles that society is throwing at you. I mean, you're the expert, and I look up to you immensely for having survived and having persisted with it.
I'm honored, Tom. Thank you. I think you know what it is that you know, and I look up to you as well, you know, because if I wanted to say, well, how do we find, you know, like this was going back to when I first moved to the UK, just as a little bracket here, you know, I don't want to forget about what I wanted to talk about, but as I digest what you just said, but, you know, the thing was that when I first came here and I sort of reformed the band with a British lineup, I kept saying to the guys, you know, like we needed to do a cover or something, you know, because I wanted to kind of not just showcase what we had to do, but show which side or which part of metal we belong to, right? And to me, the purest and the sort of like the closest interpretation of that I could come across in spirit was Celtic Frost. So that's why, like, one of the earliest things that the only covers we ever played live at that time, albeit it didn't sound amazing at that point, it was Into the Crypts of Rays, you know, and that's why we did it, was because, you know, I mean, I'm going back quite a while now, but, you know, it was because that's what felt like, you know, this is the true part of metal that we belong to. We're not doing covers of any bands, you know, right now who just released an album. We're not the whatever. This is the part that we belong to, you know, so you can take it or leave it. So I almost used your art as a way of identifying our own platform, in a way, if that makes sense. You know, so
people are getting tired of us professing our respect for each other every 5 minutes. but I hope they understand that this is not an ordinary constellation of people talking to each other. This is really a very unique podcast. May I ask you, are you still in touch with the musicians that you had when you were in Iran? Are they still around? Are they still in Iran? Are you communicating with them? What do they think of the incarnation of the band that you have right now?
That's a great question, and yes, I am. Not all of them, of course, you know. Some of them, actually, they completely stopped playing this music. After I left, they were like, we were only playing metal because of you, Cheyenne, so we're not gonna play this anymore anyway, you know, which was interesting to me. I never knew I had that much of an influence on people, but, you know, they quit. One of them became like a film director, the other one sort of, you know, just one of them completely quit. The other one, he switched to playing like pop music, basically, you know, and he does well for that. So I'm very proud of him for that. And the main guy who I actually started the band with, he's still over there. He's still super supportive, and actually he still contributes to TRIVAX in one way or another. So that last video that you will have watched, that's one of the only songs that's not entirely written by me, you know, and he actually played a big part in that. And that's the reason why I used that song, Against All Opposition, with him. He's over there. By the way, I'm gonna send this to him. He would be very thrilled to know that you and I talked about him, by the way. So is his participation in such music, as you're releasing it with the last few songs you've done, is that dangerous for him? It is, yeah. That's why I don't say his name, and that's why you can't find him on any public online platforms or anything. Understand. Yeah. I was actually wondering about that. The people who played with you, when I watch your recent videos, I was wondering, the people who played with you at the time, if they have to fear repercussions in Iran because of that, because they were affiliated with you. Yeah. I mean, that's always an issue, unfortunately, and for better or worse, I don't know how to stop or go quiet. I just get louder, and as time goes on, I find more ways of just like kind of rattling the Islamic cage a little bit more. But that's just the way it goes. People who I surround myself with, whether it's members of, without going into too much detail for obvious reasons, people are very supportive, and they stand by the same things. There's something about this that I will tell you offline that I think you will appreciate. Unfortunately, I can't tell on here, again, for safety concerns, but there's a little anecdote there that I think you will really appreciate. But just going back to it, I think ultimately the thing that we all have in common, at least those of us who follow this particular subculture and this path in life seriously, is the case of, it doesn't matter what the external outcomes are or how severe they are, whether it's what Switzerland was like in 1982 or 3, or whether what Iran is like now. It doesn't matter. What ultimately matters is that even if you're in a free society, you still pursue that path of rebellion and liberation, regardless of the outcomes, if there are any or if there aren't. I think it's all about just sticking true to that path of expression. I don't know how you relate to that.
It's a thin line. It's a two-sided thing. I'm the first one who never liked to be told what to think and what to do. If my starting with my school time, which was severely damaged by me always having problems with authority figures, and me not wanting to be told what to do, and of course this basically set up the entire path of my life. But at the same time, I've been given a platform, a huge gift by the audience. And in my opinion, even though I honestly don't take myself that serious, and I really mean that, and people who know me know that's true, but I still think we have some kind of responsibility. If this platform is given to you as a gift, are you supposed to just walk blindly and never address anything that needs to be addressed, especially for young people? And I'm speaking as a former young person, with the same issues decades ago. But
I wouldn't be able to tell. Sorry to interrupt you, but that young thing, I wouldn't be able to tell, especially not from how you perform on stage. I don't think that's changed one bit. If anything, you're better now than you probably ever were before.
I'm glad it seems that way. My health is falling apart, and it's becoming quite a struggle. But here I am still. Anyway, what I wanted to say is I really don't want to become a Bono of U2 or some of the other protagonists, even if I share their concerns sometimes. But I don't want to be a missionary. And I respect my audience the way I look at myself. I think they don't want to be told what to think by me. What right do I have to tell them politically or environmentally or whatever? Do I have a right to tell them? No, I don't really have a right. And they don't want to be told by Tom fucking Warrior out of everybody what to think or what to do. So it's kind of an internal controversy. Do you address issues that you know need to be addressed, especially for people who are shaping this planet right now and in the future, the young people in the audience? Do you address these things, or do you keep your mouth shut because it's not your place? I'm not a politician, otherwise I would be a politician, but I'm a musician. On the other hand, I've traveled the world for 43 years, and I've seen a million things. I've talked to a million people, and I've seen ups and downs, and I tend to hope that I have some kind of intelligence, and I'm following what's happening to the environment. I'm following what's happening to people who are suppressed, to women, to animals. And sometimes it's very difficult for me to shut the fuck up. And so I do address these things. I simply try to give it some measure and not to overdo things. As I said, I don't want to become a Bono. But I know that people who come to my concerts come for the music and not for Tom's fucking preaching. So this is always a very difficult issue and you have to trust your instinct, and you have to trust, is it the right moment for this or not? Unless, of course, you are a political band, of which there are a number, and maybe you are one of them, probably. But
yeah, unintentionally, yes. Yeah, by nature.
Yeah, but there too, you probably became a musician because you're a fanatic for the music. But then you also grew up in an environment where you felt, should I shut up? No, no, I'm talking to equals. I'm talking to people of my generation, and music also carries thoughts. Music carries energy. And
yes,
I have to admit, I mean, certain things that certain musicians said that I look up to in the past 50 years, ever since I became a metal fan in the 70s, sometimes I read an interview or read an interview as a young teenager. I was like, wow, this makes me think. Even though I'm reading this interview for music, but sometimes they said something about the environment or whatever, or political situation. I was like, wow, this makes me think. So in a way, yeah, you have this responsibility to. It would be very blind to just go on and act like the planet is perfect and then never say anything. I'm just doing it for record sales. How superficial is that? No, sometimes you have to. If you have some kind of conscience, you have to stake your, at least parts of your career, because you will always find people who disagree with you and might no longer buy your albums. But sometimes you have to stake that against each other and take responsibility and say something, as long as you do it well measured, I guess.
You know, this is very interesting because I have actually said this before about you. In fact, you know, just recently I had a conversation when I was over in Norway, and we were having a conversation, you know, and the gentleman who I was speaking to, I don't know how, but your name came up, and he was saying that, oh, Tom sometimes might say some things that I don't agree with. I'm not sure why this is and that. And the thing that I said to him, and I will tell you exactly the same thing that I said in this direct conversation, is that I think part of what makes an artist special, first of all, is the fact that they have those opinions to begin with. That for the majority of the part, that may get channeled throughout the music, that may get channeled through the music and the lyrics or the whatever. But you're not, you know, a lot of us, we don't pick up an instrument and start doing this just because we're just passive by life. You know, we're just happy and everything just passes us by, and then we wave and smile. No, it's because we have a problem with a lot of fucking things, you know.
Exactly.
Either we don't like being told what to do, or there's stuff that we take issue with, you know. And to me, I would much rather someone, especially an artist, take up actually voicing their concerns about stuff. Now, whether it's an extremely controversial issue or not, I don't think that even matters. You know, I think that it's like a blessing and a curse. You know, like we go after these things. We want to be heard as musicians and as artists because we have opinions, because we want to. And at the core of it, it's not just having an opinion for the sake of it either, but rather wanting to at least change or improve or tweak the surrounding world based on our own intuitions and our own understanding and knowledge of the world. So based on that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. If anything, I think that self-censorship is a lot scarier than not expressing what it is that you think, because ultimately, like you kind of pointed out too, then that comes down to, well, why is it that you're playing music then? Just to sell records, just to sell albums? Well, you could get AI to do that if you wanted to, you know?
Exactly. Well, one of my favorite counter arguments is, you know, he's a musician, he should stick to playing music. Which, of course, I understand the argument, and it's got a point. But on the other hand, so who are you? You know, if you're a baker or a taxi driver or a banker, you also have a political opinion. And why is that opinion better than musician is also a job?
Yeah.
And why should I not, just because a musician should not voice mine, and because you're a baker, you know it better than me? No, we all have our opinions. And if anything, having traveled the world for 43 years and to all kinds of nations, and having been in touch with the people who live there, like literally in touch, not like a tourist, but actually talking to them and traveling their countries on tours and everything, maybe even gives you a better oversight over the planet than a housewife from Hackney. And I apologize to everybody from Hackney for that example.
Yeah. I'm sure someone in North London is currently pulling their hair out.
I just lost the entire Hackney audience.
Probably didn't lose much then based on that. That's great. No, but I agree with you, and again, like I said, not everyone has to agree with it. I understand that even for me personally, I have some controversial opinions, but that's one of the reasons why I also enjoy, and I feel genuinely, I know it's a cliche word and sometimes gets used in the wrong context, but I do genuinely feel blessed that I have the opportunity to have this podcast, not just to share my own opinions, but get to hear what other people are thinking as well, and I think this is what you need more of. And I've seen that argument too, by the way, what you're saying about, oh, you're just a musician, you should stick to that. I think I saw someone saying that about David Gilmour a little while ago in the comments, and lots of people seem to agree with it, but I didn't get it. It's like you're still a citizen of the world. You still live on the same planet. We have to share the same oxygen somehow, so let's talk. Why not?
Well, my gardener, or if I had a gardener, my gardener would have a political opinion, so why can't I have one?
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I have a garden, but you get the point. It's like it's a strange argument, which at first I understand, but if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense.
No. If anything, musicians are one argument, or not argument, but analogy which I've used before is that musicians are a lot like emotional sponges, because we're more sensitive to our surroundings. We're more sensitive to stories, to experiences, to the news, to the environment, to all of these things. And I think that, if anything, a musician or an artist at the very least may be able to tune into places or see things that most average people don't.
Well, here's the thing. My life is not driven by finances. And that's already a huge difference to those who ruin our planet. My life is driven by what is hopefully at least a semblance of art, and by perception, and like you correctly said, by feelings, by emotions. And those who are simply driven by capitalist notions, and I don't equal the freedom of the West with capitalism. That is, to me, two very different things. Right. But those who are driven by finances alone, I mean, unfortunately, those are the people who are largely in charge of this planet and of our destiny. And I'm not sure if that's a good idea.
No, I don't think so either. I personally have a big problem, even though I come from a theocratic background, and that's something that I definitely have a fucking problem with. Having lived in the West, one thing that I have a big problem with, generally speaking, is just pharmaceutical companies,
Absolutely.
And that aside, let's say even just how our food system works and everything, how the soil is then treated, that there are like mini arguments then to be had within those, but just as a general oversight, I think it's very clear to me at this point that we live in a world that is constantly selling you disease and then charging you for the treatment at the same time.
For the remedy, yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly how it works. You create a market, and the market is a derogative term for us, for
sure.
us minions who don't own a multinational corporation. We are the minions. We are the market. That's how we appear. If we ever appear, we appear as the market.
Absolutely. And I guess you could even say that the religion does the same thing as well, at least the monotheistic organized religion, they always...
No, it's not that you could say. Of course, you have to say it.
Right.
Because religion is outright fascism. Always has been, always will be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's a very powerful take, and I think that when it concerns the group or when it concerns just the individual, I can see the value in it, because what it's telling you is to have discipline. But when you follow it to a T, especially a religion like Islam in particular, and especially then when you put that in the context of a group, then a community, then a society, then countries, it's the most disastrous fucking thing I think that we've got. Or one of them anyway.
Religion exploits people who are in need of some kind of support in their life. People who, due to circumstances or their personality, feel weak. And I don't mean this from the high horse. I've had many times in my life where I felt weak and vulnerable. But religion exploits that weakness in a most brutal way. And what has religion given us? You know, if there is really a superior being somewhere in this universe, this being must be of such intellectual, or whatever you want to call it, proportions, that he, she, or it doesn't think in human terms. You know, that if that entity has created the entire universe, I don't think it masturbates to us praying to it, because it's on such a high level that we as humans cannot even comprehend. So religion is taking this to a human level, this concept of where are we coming from. It takes it to a human level and exploits the people who seek support, who seek remedy from their pain, from their weakness, from not knowing what's around, and then it instrumentalizes these people and sends them to war against each other, or exploits them as children in the so-called churches, abuses them as children, and so on, takes their money, builds insane monuments to their power, churches, whatever you have. So your religion, even though it suggests to us that it's based on something supernatural, spiritual, it's actually an inherently human thing, and an inherently capitalist fascist mechanism. And again, who am I to know who created the universe? I have no problem admitting I don't know. But if that being exists, it must be of such capabilities and greatness and understanding that we cannot even comprehend it. And I don't think it will thrive of a church being built to it. The church is being built for the humans and for some people who seek power, not for the actual entity, if it even exists. But that's just me.
I think there are
I see after this podcast I won't have any fans left. Thank you.
I have a feeling you probably just gained a few. Not that you needed more, of course, but the way I'm looking at this is this. I think perhaps if you want to look at religion in a more optimistic view, not religion, but perhaps spirituality and a relationship with an omnipotent deity, I think that a healthier way to perhaps look at it is, rather than waiting for this thing to look at us and approve us, think of it like, let's say it's more like a tree and we are the little branches or the leaves. So if we are to pay attention to it or pay heed to it, we're only paying attention to, or rather, it's an act of self-worship, but it's a self that's bigger than the one that we've been gifted with in this lifetime, you know, because if I wanted to dissect it from the spiritual perspective, I'm not saying that's the whole truth or whatever, but that's the way I look at it from the more optimistic point of view of if there is such a thing. You know what I mean?
I agree with you, because one also needs to define that spirituality it doesn't equal religion.
Yeah.
I tend to think that on some level I am a spiritual person, but I have nothing to do with religion whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, if you crave miracles, my brain has a very limited capacity. So I'm fascinated by what science finds out about the universe by quantum physics, even though I understand only a fraction of it. My brain is not I'm not a quantum physics scientist, and it's mind blowing what these people, the understanding they have of the mechanisms of the universe.
I relate to that.
Even what I can understand with my tiny understanding, it's a universe full of miracles. It's amazing, all these things that happen in the universe, and they're so much bigger than we are, and they're of such power and so untamed that a human being will be devoured by it, could we even get close to it. Isn't that fascinating enough? Isn't that the miracles that you're looking for? We're a result of this. Why do you need some priest who in his spare time abuses children to tell you, the miracle, and this person, is a holy person? No, we are all the results of that. Every leaf we see, every rainfall is a result of all these mechanisms. It's absolutely amazing. You don't need some invented imaginary figure that just serves to give humans power. That this whole thing is so much bigger than that.
Yeah. That I agree with. I think that the thing of it that I think most people struggle to come to terms with, both religious and non-religious people. This is something that we always struggle with, is that we like to look at ourselves in a good light, and whatever that good is defined by. We like to think everyone thinks of themselves as the hero of the story. Okay. And there's, of course, good things and bad things about that. That can sometimes drive us to do great things also.
Well, but I think for humanity, that ship has sailed. Sure. I know there's good people. Yes, there's artists. But when I say that to somebody, they're always like, yeah, but there's good people. And people can also look at this beautiful building and stuff. Yeah, I know all of that. But if you take the last 15,000 years in human history and you do an assessment of the average, I think it comes out quite negatively. 15,000 years with murder and war and betrayal and what have you, and destruction of the environment. And I think that ship has sailed, that we want to look at ourselves in a good light. I think we need to have whatever is next on this planet, we'll have to have a new go at that.
Yeah, that's quite funny, but of course it's true to from that perspective. Yeah, you could very easily see that.
I mean, here we are in the 21st century, and left and right there's war, and religious war, and we're still talking about women's rights and stuff like. I mean, what the fuck,
Yeah. Well, a lot of those wars you also have to think that are driven by profit, and
which we addressed earlier,
and profit,
which we addressed earlier. Yes, of course, it all belongs together. The people who guide corporations are no different than the people who built up the church in the past hundreds of years. Now they peacefully coexist, but it's exactly the same mechanism. Come on.
Well, there's an incentive for war to exist, There's an incentive to send money to different countries. There's an incentive to keep selling weapons and all of that, for this little board game, which to some people might just look like numbers on a screen, whereas to some other people it might mean their entire house and family being blown to pieces. And I think that,
This is the most downcast interview I've ever given. People will commit suicide after listening.
Yeah, but I mean, listen. I'm a believer of choice and taking personal sovereignty over one's own actions. But of course, with that, we're not recommending anyone to do this. But what I am also of the mindset of is that, when you sort of strip down the world and the experiences that we have, there is this degree of, there is this ugliness about it, about us, about even nature, I mean, nature is this beautiful thing, but ultimately it's also fucking terrifying, whether...
Absolutely.
If you want to think about, right, if you want to think about even what our ancestors went through just to survive nature, or what nature looks like in the ultimate wild, or what the depth of the oceans look like, or what space looks like, it's all terrifying, and it's all constantly surrounded by death and war and chaos anyway. So Absolutely. I think that there is some degree of peace, which at least for me personally, I came to find, that even though those aren't things that I seek in my personal life, understanding and acknowledging that they're a part of what we're made of, I find that there's like some degree of peace in there, and how we kind of approach life in general. At least for me, I feel like that's the case, knowing that, oh yeah, there is probably a murderer in every single one of us. There is a Cain in all of us. Just like there's also Abel in all of us as well, And I would imagine, especially with yourself, one of the things that's been most striking about your music to me, especially going some years back when I really made that first connection, I was like, aha, there's something here, was the rage and the fucking anger that's behind the music, And I think that anger, if not translated into music, if not translated into something that's beautiful and powerful, or a conversation, or whatever, that's the same thing that can translate to also war, chaos, and death. Don't you think?
You're absolutely right with that. And if you apply it to my music and my path, it's I don't know where I would be without that valve that the music is giving you. That's absolutely true. Given the circumstances of my youth and so on, it could have gone a very different way. But luckily, I found HELLHAMMER, and a lot of the anger was screamed out even at that early stage. So in CELTIC FROST, we were able to not just be angry, but also sometimes create something beautiful, which to me is not a contradiction. But yeah, you're 100% right with that.
Where do you think it comes from? Like, at least just for you personally, can you trace this back to a source? Where does that anger come from?
You're going to cost me my entire career tonight.
Let's not, but yeah, I'm curious.
My anger from even way before I became a musician. I had a very close friend who was an total outcast in our little village, just like me. His father was Indian, from India. His mother was from Finland. And of course, in that little farm village, there was no colored people, but he was colored and he had long hair like me. So we were total outcasts. So we spent all the time hanging around together, walking through the forests at night for hours and hours, like every night, talking about anything. God, the universe, anything, and there was the constant in this was the frustration with the conduct of humanity on this planet, historically and also in the present. And I think I don't know if I would call it anger, but my frustration derives directly from that. We constantly call ourselves the pinnacle of civilization, the pinnacle of development. We put ourselves above all animals and so on. And what is our record? And again, yes, I know some human beings have done great things and so on and so on. I know good architects, beautiful paintings. I know all of that. And yet, if somebody from outside this planet would look at humanity, the common thread would be 15,000 years of murder and cruelty and torture and suppressing of colored people, suppressing of women, suppressing of animals. That frustrates me because, yes, we are given a bigger brain. That's true. We have the possibilities, and every single fucking person on this planet knows what's right or wrong. You cannot convince me otherwise. If you do the wrong thing, it's a fucking choice. Nowadays, in the 21st century, everybody knows what you have to do to live together peacefully and what you have to do to start a war. Everybody knows that nowadays. You cannot claim naivete like you could maybe hundreds of years ago when peasants weren't educated. Nowadays, the information is all here and our history speaks its own tales. My frustration, my anger comes from the conduct of human beings. And yes, I'm a human being too, just to take that argument away, yes, I'm a human being too, and I'm not excluding myself. I'm fully aware that I'm part of the race that I'm criticizing here, and I'm not shying away from that responsibility. I cringe at best when faced with the things we do on this planet, to other species, to ourselves, to nature, to women. What the fuck? What gives us the right? Why have we elected to selectively turn off our brain when we know exactly how it could work and how it would be fantastic for everybody? What gives us the fucking right?
I think that one of the issues is that when you look at history, and this is like, it almost feels like it's a part of the law of the matrix that we live in, right? It almost feels like someone's programmed this into our existence, is that nothing, well, nothing lasts forever, you know, and by that, what you can relate it to is that, yes, of course, we know that nothing lasts forever, everything dies, blah, 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 the universe, all that, we get it. But what I really mean by that is that this also applies to like a pinnacle, you know, like if you look at, let's say, Rome, for example, right? That may have at one point seemed like the pinnacle of humanity, at least at that point, of course, with many faults. But even that still came to an end, you know. Any empire that truly wins and dominates the world for a while, eventually that also ends. You know, you look at all the greatest conquerors of the world, whether it's Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan, even though they were all, of course, they were serial killers, murderers, horrible human beings, but they were also winners. Those people, they still ended, they still died. And I think that there's something about that to the ever-moving, the constant motion and the cycles of motion in our existence, that even if peace is achieved, it's only temporary. Just like if war happens, that's still temporary as well. So what I was saying earlier when I was saying that there's peace in knowing that that all of that horribleness is just something that exists within all of us, and really having acceptance of that, and really being able to look in the mirror and realize that as much as you might stand against those things, part of that is within you, and the reason why you stand against it is because you've rejected parts of yourself. I think that there's some kind of a peace there. It's not a solution as such, but it's more just like you get to let it go and just act on instinct as to what's right to you. But you are 100% correct in saying that we do know the right and wrong, and I think that the source of evil really is ignorance that I think is deliberate. I think that's what it is.
That says it all. That's a perfect way of putting it. Ignorance, deliberate ignorance. I largely agree with you. I would just word something slightly different. It's not that I reject parts of my personality. I know they exist, and I've had my moments in my life. We're talking about very serious things here, but I'm far from perfect. And maybe I speak on the basis of my own mistakes. But what I've elected to do is to actually think about these things and try not to repeat them. Try not to be a negative person. I don't reject part of myself, but I don't want to be an asshole. And the times in my life when I was an asshole, I regret them.
That's powerful, man. That's very, very powerful to hear. And I do relate to that, by the way, because I've been a real cunt sometimes as well. So yeah, it comes out every now and then too. But I so appreciate you being so candid and open about that. I know this is a very honest and very pure conversation we're having here. It's very powerful, I think.
Well, as you can imagine, in 43 years, I've done a million interviews, and a lot of them are very, very boring. That's always the same question: when's your next tour? When's your next album? Which are, in a way, legitimate question. But, you know, if you're the protagonist and you hear them 10 million times, they become a bit tedious, and I really enjoy that we can talk on quite a high level here and about quite serious things. Whether the conclusions we're drawing are correct or not is not up to us to judge, but I really value that we can have like a different conversation here that requires actually some thinking before each one of us answers. That's a very nice difference, as delicate as these topics are for a lot of people, and like we both said, I'm not sure all people will agree with us, but I really enjoy to have this conversation. It's a different level.
Absolutely. I'm honored to hear that, and like, I've been anticipating this for this very exact same reason. But onto that exact point that you just made, so let's just shift the gear here for a little minute. Let's just dial it back a little bit towards music, because I really want to talk to you about this whilst we've got the time. So, one thing that, you mentioned about interviews, the one thing that everyone always talks to you about, everyone always mentions Cold Lake, and, they're always intrigued to see what response you're going to give. I don't want to go there. Everyone thought that it wasn't your best album. You've said it wasn't your best album, in fact, you referred to it as a piece of shit, which I think is admirable, if that's what you think as an artist. So let's move on from that. Monotheist. The single, possibly best return album of any metal band, in my humble opinion, personally. I do think that the album that Heaven and Hell did with Dio, when they came back in 2009 and they did that record with Tony Iommi, Geezer, Dio, and Vinny, I thought that was very powerful. But I just, for me, Monotheist may have been the greatest return album of any band in this genre, and I really want to talk to you about that. And I don't know if this is gonna make some of our listeners feel bad when they realize how long it has been, but I realized earlier that in a couple of years that record is gonna be 20 years old.
Yeah, I know.
That's fucking insane.
20 years ago, me and Martin were deep into the work on Monotheist. We worked on this album for almost 5.5 years. And 20 years ago, we were in the middle of it. And it was a difficult time, a very exhausting time, but also an extremely exciting time to work with Martin again and to find a Martin who had matured to the point where he dared to submit music, which he didn't in the early days. He always felt he had some musical ideas, but he never dared to come up to me. He told me that himself, because he was 4 years younger. And of course, when you're 20 and 16, that's a significant difference. But when we did Monotheist, we were equals. We were both adults. And Martin, for the first time, brought a couple of songs, which, of course, I still was the majority songwriter, but I have to say his songs were amazing. And it was so enjoyable to work with him on music and on lyrics and on the production and on the arrangements, on the concept, as equals. It wasn't easy because, like I said earlier, we were very different people, but we always, actually during the very last meeting I had with Martin 2 weeks before his death, we both agreed that even though we had our fights and our differences, we always managed at the end of the day to do something creative with this energy. Once we had said what we wanted to say to each other and we had cooled down a bit, we managed to combine our opinions into something very artistic. And I think you can hear that on Monotheist.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing about the album that really caught me off guard the first time I heard it was the simplicity of the riffs. Now there's a lot of complications around it with the sound and the different layers and the structures and the lyrics. There's a lot of intellectualism behind it, but what caught me off guard was just how, for example, the opening track on the album with Progeny, how just daringly it's just here's one note. We're just gonna play this. And I was like, wow, you really like need to have so much behind you to pull off something like that. I think that record is absolutely fantastic, you know, especially songs like Obscured. I know you played that, I think, at Wacken not too long ago, and I thought I thought that's very, very special song, man. The lyrics just fucking insane. Really cool.
Yeah, some of that material is quite intimidating to play on stage because I'm not a musical genius, and if you work on a song for 5.5 years, it's all good and dandy, but then you have to reproduce it on stage within 3 minutes, and then it becomes very intimidating. but yeah, I'm a bit obsessed with simplification. I look up to all those bands who are not simple, like Emerson, Lake Palmer, Opeth, and the Dream Theater, and all these bands. My God, they're fascinating, and I listen to them all the time.
Cool.
And I always knew that I cannot achieve that technical level. It's not given to me. And I'm simply being honest. You know, people will say, "No, you can play guitar." No, I can't play guitar. I really can't. I'm just being honest. So what was left to me and Martin was much the same. Martin was a good bassist, but he wasn't Jaco Pastorius. So what was left to us to be noticed was to compensate that lack of talent with ideas, with trying to do some original things that maybe other people wouldn't do right away. And I think that combination of heaviness and some weird ideas, that's really what defines Celtic Frost, and it was born out of desperation, but became our trademark.
I mean, I don't think there's any need for the modesty, man. You know, because calling it lack of talent, it's.
I'm being 100% honest here. I'm not fishing for compliment. I'm simply telling you the way it is. I know myself. As I said in the beginning, I'm very, very proud of what we've done. I'm very, very grateful to the audience for giving me a lifelong career, and I think we've done some good albums, we've done some shitty ones, but I'm not really a talented guitar player. I'm simply not, believe it or not. But I know it, and I'm simply being honest. And people don't have to talk me out of it. I've made the best of it. You know, I'm still here. I'm the first one who's surprised that I've been given a 43-year career with hardly being able to play guitar, but here I am.
But I think that I totally appreciate that, and I do understand what you are saying, but equally, like what makes music good, or being talented, to me, the expression is more of, or rather the purity of expression is a more valuable outcome of being a musician. Like, I think it's all fine and dandy being a guitar player, for example, who can sweep pick at like 300 BPM or whatever. That's great, and that takes talent, takes practice, but where's the expression in that? I am someone who thrives for expression and purity of emotions.
Well, I'm sure a guitar player who can pick at that speed, if it's the right person, they can also express themselves. It's a different way of expressing themselves. If they actually have emotions, you will also be hearing it in that kind of playing. I don't want to generalize. And Celtic Frost was really not about being liked by everybody. What we did is what we did, and you can hate it or you can like it. Both is fine. I know it's a very flawed band musically and on a personal level, as we have all seen, unfortunately. But we did what we did, for better or for worse, and I think some of it gives me reason to feel a bit of pride. Some of it gives me reason to feel cringe. But I'm nobody's more surprised that I'm still here as a musician than I am, and I really mean that.
Well, surprised or not, we're happy that you're here as a musician.
I'm too, and that's why I keep saying I'm honestly deeply grateful to the audiences, because whether one is a genius or not, and I'm certainly not, at the end of the day, it's the audience who decides, do you have a career as a musician or not? And 43 years ago, I would have never thought I would be given that opportunity. I mean, we were very realistic. 43 years ago, there was only one band out of Switzerland that had made some waves, and it was Crocus. And some of Crocus's music at that time was quite all right, but it wasn't really, game changing. So we thought, no band out of Switzerland has ever achieved anything. Do we have the chance to achieve something? No, probably not. We were very realistic about that. But then here I am, and this is by the grace of the audience, who were bearing with me and have patience with my shitty records and embraced my better records. And I'm infinitely grateful for their patience and understanding,
Yeah. I appreciate the way you approach it sometimes as well, especially that meme, the Barbie meme you just posted the other day. I was in fucking stitches over that, man.
Yeah, I broke the internet with that one, I guess.
I think you did. You have been the meme lord for quite a few years. I think you're quite underrated in that realm. But the credit where credit's due.
There's a second career if I fail with the music.
Yeah, there's still time, eh? No, that's amazing, man. The thing, just going back to Monotheist quickly, because this is actually something I always wanted to talk to you about, and it just sprung upon me that we've got the opportunity to do that right now. One of the things about that particular time period of Celtic Frost that I was just utterly fascinated by because of what Monotheist just sounded like, was the documentary, the Dying God documentary that you guys did. That's a very, very interesting watch for anyone who might not have watched it. For anyone who has, then they know exactly what I'm talking about. But there was one very striking moment in that. Well, there were multiple striking moments, but one in particular that kind of stood out to me that I never, that still, like, I can't wrap my head around it. I think it's when you guys were doing this very long tour and you were coming to the end of it, and then you were offered to do a show in Mexico City, if I'm not mistaken. And even though it was a great offer, or at least it seemed like it at the time, the tensions were so high in the band that, from my understanding and what I remember of the documentary, the rest of the musicians in the band pretty much flat out refused to do it just because of the personal tensions. Am I recalling this correctly?
Well, some children just wanted to go home. and my opinion was we spent our entire life building this band, building this career. And then we came back together after 16 years, spent 5.5 years working on a massive comeback album to redefine the band and show the world Celtic Frost is still here. And then we do a world tour of 125 concerts. And then we say no to 2 more. This is not why we reformed the band. This is not why we formed the band in the first place. When we formed the band in the first place, and this goes back to what we just talked about earlier, this was our dream to be given such an opportunity. How many Swiss bands play in Mexico as a headliner? And then some of the children say, I want to go home to mommy and daddy. That didn't fly with me. I'm sorry. We were given an opportunity, and the audiences wanted to see us, and I was eager to play for them. We put in so much work in the reunion alone. You don't even have to look at the entire history of Celtic Frost. In the reunion alone, we put in years of work. We formed our own record company. We formed our own publishing house. We financed the album ourselves because we wanted to have total control, and it was a hugely expensive album. We put in so much work and effort and finances, and then, no, I want to go home. Fuck that, That's being a professional musician. That's being a wuss.
Yeah. Well, this is why I brought it up, because to me, it seemed like such an alien move or decision, that I was just like, I can't ever imagine making a decision like that, that really, I was more so, I guess, fascinated by the perspective of, wow, really? Are the tensions that bad, or you want to go home so bad that...
It wasn't really about the tension. That it was really about what are we going to do. We weren't on the same page in are we going to tour or not. The tensions existed anyway, and by that point they had become really, really bad. They had become almost crippling, and a few months later they were crippling. I mean, the last few rehearsal sessions of Celtic Frost, we didn't play a single note of music. We just had arguments, discussions.
Wow.
And I came with new music that later came out on Triptykon's albums. I brought in new music, and I had relearned old songs, and I brought all those to practice. We didn't play a single fucking tone. It's simply the documentary was supposed to simply document the comeback of Celtic Frost, and of course it turned into something completely different. There's hundreds of hours of footage that are not in the documentary, and the director told me he took that Mexico incident as a placeholder for many other such discussions that happened. But he could, it would have been a 20-hour documentary had he put everything in there. So he took this to show the audience what was happening behind the scenes. But there was many more about all kinds of things that one shouldn't even discuss as professional musicians who are on the same page, and who, not least, have been given this amazing opportunity by the audiences to actually have a career, to actually do a world tour as a headliner. There again, this was our dream 40 years ago, and then we're being given this dream, and we're saying no. I mean, yeah. But I mean, there was a lot of things wrong. Like I said earlier, unfortunately, Celtic Frost was very flawed on a human level, and without wanting to put too much blame on a dead people's shoulder. But Martin, by his own admission after the band fell apart, told me I should have acted differently. We could have saved the band. And I said, well, that's very nice that you tell me now. It was really Martin's inactivity and tolerance to certain behavior in the band that made the breakup possible. Martin told me, had you and I acted as one, which we usually did, the band would still be together. And I agree with that, but unfortunately he didn't. He didn't act like that, and it cost us the band. And I think Martin regretted this the rest of his life. At least that's what his closest friends told me while he was still alive. When he was playing with his Karaoke from Hell band, where they covered other people's music at his club, people told me, people who were in this band and people who were very close to him said every night he talks about how great he was in Celtic Frost to play these stages all over the planet and so on. It's terrible. It's such a waste. We could have done the Triptykon albums as Celtic Frost with him, and I think they would have actually grown with Martin's contribution. But it is as it is, unfortunately, and at least we salvaged our friendship. But I think that sense of loss, whenever we met over the years after the breakup of Celtic Frost, that sense of loss was so present. It was like a thick mass.
It's very interesting to hear that, I guess on the bright side of it, you could say that at least we got to hear Martin captured, I guess, in his best form as far as we know it on Monotheist. I think that
I fully agree. We came out of the studio in late 2005, and we had done a mix of the album with Peter Takren. And we came back to Switzerland, and I listened to the mix, and I was really unhappy with it. It just didn't click. And at first, Martin really liked the mix, and then he played it in one of his clubs in Zurich over the club PA, and he came to me and said, "You're right. It doesn't work if I play some other mixes, some other bands, and then I play our album. It doesn't work yet. We need to go back to the studio in Switzerland and remix the entire album, do a new mix."
No.
And I had written a new song, a completely off-the-wall song, completely different than anything else, with synthesizer and everything. And I brought it to the studio when we were starting to remix the album in like December 2005. And Martin listened to it and said, "Wow, let me write lyrics to this." And a few days later came to the mixing sessions with lyrics. We had never practiced the song. I had written the music, and he had written the lyrics at our own places. We had never played it as a band. And he said, "I'm going to go to the vocal booth and do my lyrics to your music." And that became Totengott,
right?
Which is part of the end trilogy of the album. And that was the last time Martin and I collaborated. And to me, as unusual as the song is, well, maybe it's not unusual. It's in a way, it's a very typical Celtic Frost song because the music is not typical for metal band, and Martin really poured his soul into both the lyrics and the delivery. I don't know where the lyrics came from because, as I said, he wrote this like within 2 days or so, never having heard the song before, never having practiced the song. But I remember him going into the vocal booth and singing, and me and the engineer were sitting there, and our hair was literally, we're like, what is happening here? Unfortunately, that's the last time we created something together. Toten God is the last song we ever wrote together. But at the same time, I think it really shows what was possible between Martin and I from that last trilogy on the album, Synagoga Satanae, which is an ultra dark song, which is also by Martin and me, and then Toten God and Winter with the classical piece. These 3 songs alone show basically the entire history of Celtic Frost, the entire history of Martin and Tom. And every single time I go to the studio with Triptykon, every single time I stand on the stage with Triptykon, every single time I write music here at home, I miss the presence of Martin as much as I love the musicians I'm working with. This is something that can never be replaced. Nobody can ever take that place in my life, unfortunately.
I appreciate that. Well, if you think of how many years and the experiences and everything that you guys had together, and also, of course, doubled by the fact that he was I never had the privilege to meet Martin whilst he was around, but he seemed like quite a character. So that's not something you can replace very easily. Yeah.
Martin wasn't easy to handle. He was actually quite difficult to handle at times. And at times he was also quite full of himself, and maybe he would say the same about me. But on the other hand, if you listen to songs like Synagoga Satanae or Crypts of Rays or whatever you have in the history of Celtic Frost, you have to be like that to be in a band like that. You shouldn't be an easygoing average person from the next street corner. You kind of have to have that character to make music that is at least tries to be a bit different.
That's exactly what we were saying earlier. Yeah. That's exactly.
Martin, as I said, Martin didn't write so much music, but his mere presence and the discussion of every single song that I brought, we would discuss everything in detail, or every piece of lyrics that either him or I would write, we would go through it together and discuss it. His presence was more ideological, and this became as important as the actual music itself. And as I said, you can't replace that. I mean, I'm surrounded, luckily, by very, very good musicians, but there's only really one Martin in the history, and unfortunately, that Martin is gone. What can I say?
I appreciate that. Well, at least you got to do that record together, and you still have all the history from everything else that you guys did together in the 80s, and most importantly, I guess beyond all of that, you guys reconciled before he passed on.
Yeah, like I said, we remained friends until Martin's death, and we actually, the last time we met was 2 weeks before his passing, and we maintained that level of exchange, even if it was not musical. We maintained a very special level of communication between us, and I gave him everything I did with Triptykon, because to me there was so much Celtic Frost in it. He needed to have it. But I agree with you. It's at least we went out with an album that is worthy of the name Celtic Frost.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, is that something that you think about a lot, about Martin in general?
Every single day. I'm not saying that credibility. You can ask all my friends. You can ask my partner. I think about Martin and what we had in Celtic Frost every single day, and it's sometimes very, very emotional, very difficult.
Yeah, I can completely, I can sympathize with that. You know, again, you can't replace people, you can't replace relationships, but just from my own little tiny bit of life experience, I do understand. And you know, again, what a brilliant legacy to leave behind, at least, you know. And I'm very glad that you guys came back and did that last record. You know, it would have been a real shame for Celtic Frost to end before Monotheist, I think.
It was a shame to end where it did, but I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing as well was that, you know, I mean, ultimately as well, we do have to give credit to the work that you did with Triptykon as well. You know, I mean, it would be amazing to get a new record at some point in the future, but for what it's worth, everything you've released so far with Triptykon's been absolutely sensational, really.
Well, I'm working on the fourth album. It's happening.
Amazing.
We're definitely doing it this year. I've become a bit slower with age, but it'll happen.
That's incredible.
One should also consider that the Requiem was 2 years of work, and then I also did an album with Triumph of Death last year. Yeah, so I'm not just sitting around, but yes, it'll happen.
Incredible. That's fantastic. And just one thing as well. So again, this could go spin off into a whole other thing, you know, which is fine if you wanted to go there. But one thing that's been sort of signature to the Triptykon albums, at least the first two that were kind of more just normal studio records, is the cover. That is by Mr. H.R. Giger. What would be the... I don't know if I recall you saying that you already have another artwork from him before he passed on that you were thinking of using, or...
One of the most astonishing moments of my life was after Triptykon released the first album, and I brought it to Giger. I brought his archive copies, and he looked at it, and then I did some other things at the Giger house. And as I wanted to leave a few hours later, Giger was sitting in the kitchen, and he called me over. He said, "Do you have another quarter hour?" And I said, "Of course." And so we sat down, and he said, "I would like to work with you guys also in the future." And I was just sitting there with my jaw on the floor, because having been involved with the Giger house, I knew that almost every day bands came and asked to have a cover by Giger, and he turned down so much, almost everything. And I too had once been the guy who asked him, and then to have Giger come to me and suggest that was an honor beyond belief. And he said, "You're the first band who has used my artwork in an appropriate manner, the way I would use it, without distorting the photo, without putting a logo at the image, without putting a logo in the middle or anything like that. You've treated my art with respect, and I would like to collaborate with you." So we sat there and we resolved, let's do 3 albums together, a triptych. And he told me to go through his catalog and select a work, which I did for the next 2 Triptykon albums. The second one was, of course, Milana Cosmata, and luckily,
also a great record.
Luckily, I chose and designed the entire artwork for the next studio album, and he looked at it and approved it maybe a week before his death.
Oh my God!
And that's what's going to be on the next Triptykon. It's basically the last collaboration Giger ever did with a musical entity.
Wow, that is really quite something. I hope the people listening to this understand how important and how big that is. Wow, that's awesome.
It's at least big to me, because I grew up looking at the Necronomicon, seeing Emerson, Lake and Palmer standing at his house, looking at their cover and everything, and little Tom would have never thought that I would even be in the vicinity of that guy. And
yeah, that's powerful, man. Holy shit!
When the next Triptykon album comes out, I will have 4 Giger covers collaborated with him, which is something that blows my own mind. It's something that I still have to digest.
So, as they say, the best is yet to come, right?
I'm not sure about that, but it is to come. as far as Giger, everything he does is good. But as far as I am concerned, I'm not so sure about that.
Sure. No, but this is exciting, you know, the fact that you actually sort of work together on it rather than just anything, you know. I mean, as special as it was going all the way back, you know, whether it was with To Megatherion or with the, you know, with the first two albums of Triptykon, I think that's wonderful. But I'm very excited, you know, and that, I guess, I don't know, does that influence the songwriting then? Do you now then?
Very much so. Very much so. I feel having a Giger cover is an obligation to really dig for the best that you can do, to even come somewhere remotely near to his level of art. You cannot just do an average album when you have a Giger cover. You need to live up to that cover, which incidentally is the reason why we didn't use the Giger cover on Morbid Tales in Celtic Frost. Why we waited until the second album To Megatherion, because we just felt the band around the time Morbid Tales was not up to the task to write an album that matches a Giger cover. We were that honest. And as far as the future is concerned, Giger's widow was kind enough to offer me continued access to Giger's works for future Triptykon albums, but I told her that I wouldn't want to do an album that Giger himself hasn't approved and hasn't co-selected with me. So I'm not going to take her up on that offer. I really want to be true to what Giger wanted and what Giger saw.
So I know that you haven't released the album yet, but in that case, then what does this mean in the future of Triptykon? After this
well, I don't know how long I'm going to be alive. I cannot see us do dozens of albums in the future. I will eventually check out from this planet because I've done my turn and I'm a bit tired of humanity. So there might be one, at best, two more Triptykon albums, and of course there's plenty of fantastic art out there. In a different manner, of course, but that could adorn a Triptykon album. As a matter of fact, I've purchased the rights to an artwork that was designed to be a Celtic Frost album, which now will never happen. I wanted to release all the demos that we did for Monotheist, which was actually a plan Martin and I had. We always wanted to release the demos that we did in the 5.5 years for Monotheist. There's some really, I think it's quite worthy material there. But some of the former members of Celtic Frost and also Martin's brother, who inherited all the rights, are very, very difficult to work with. Though after running against walls, I eventually abandoned that idea. So I'm with this artwork, and the artwork is phenomenal. And should there be an album after the next Triptykon album, I'm going to use that artwork for it.
Fair enough. That's very interesting, I guess, little backstory to hear there. You know, I'd never heard about this previously, so that's pretty cool to know. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I'm very excited.
It's a shame. The album, the Celtic Frost album, was fully designed. It was basically ready to be mastered, and I think it would have been quite an interesting album, not just a cash grab with some bottom of the barrel music. Demos are actually quite sophisticated. There's a lot of unheard material, and it would have made a very strong companion album to Monotheist. And as I said, it was actually a plan we had when we were together. The album would have happened had the band stayed together. But as it is right now, I can't do it. So.
Can't win them all, eh?
No. Martin's brother is a very, very different person. He's a banker, interested in finances, and has absolutely zero connections to music or art. He actually, I think, looked down on Martin quite a lot for Martin's choices of a career. And here we go, that I have to deal with that now.
That's an unfortunate thing. Yeah, you know, we don't know what we'll be missing out on, I guess. But, you know, at least there's the there is the new Triptykon to look forward to, of course.
There will actually still be some Celtic Frost songs on the next Triptykon album. Well, as I said, we worked for 5.5 years on Monotheist, and
sure,
some of the songs were rejected because we voted on every song, and there was only so and so many songs we could put on the album, and some of the songs weren't finished in time. And there's still a handful of songs, and some of them I think are quite worthy, and will find their way onto the next Triptykon album. So Celtic Frost, in some shape or form, still is alive.
That's beautiful. I'm very happy to hear that. You know, also great that you've actually been playing some of the songs live as well, properly. You know, with Triptykon, it's great. I'm also very much looking forward to seeing you guys again in. Well, I guess by the time this episode comes out, it'll be just a matter of a few weeks until you return back to the UK again.
Looking forward immensely to that. I've heard only the best about that location. So we're all looking forward immensely to going there and experiencing it.
It's
of course
very cool.
After this podcast, nobody's going to appear, but it's the thought that counts.
No, I'm sure more people will appear. The thing is, but you're right about the location. It is a very cool place. You know, fair play to them. It's in Scarborough, and TRIVAX. We actually played there just last year, the first edition of the festival,
right.
And. Bolzer were also playing as well, and you know, fellow Swissmen, and there was a river, there's a sea right next to you where it is, you know, and you know, it was fairly cold, and I'm a little bit of a freak, and I like going and swimming in cold water, you know, and I prompted pretty much every other band to go and swim in there, or at least, you know, if not with me, at least in their own time. The only person who actually followed through was Okoi from Bolzer, so I do respect him for that. But it was very fun.
Doesn't surprise me.
No. Yeah, absolutely. But no, obviously.
I have to say, you're very smart. If there's a cold ocean and you get everybody else to swim it, that's a very smart way of getting rid of your competition.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. If you can't handle the cold, you don't deserve to share the stage with us. So there we go. But yeah, no, of course, you know, it's actually very healthy, you know, and going to the cold, it has tons of benefits. I'm a little bit of a freak about it, and I'll never shut up talking about it, actually. But it is a great location, lots of history there, and there's also the Scarborough Castle as well. You know, if you get the chance, we should go check it out up there. Right. It is very, very cool. Tom, listen, man, I could probably talk to you all day, but I feel like with the conversations that we've had so far, to me it feels like lightning in a bottle. So I want to keep it exactly where it is now. Thank you so much, sir, for taking the time out of your day, out of your evening, to have this conversation with me here on Iblis Manifestation. It really, really means a lot.
It means a lot to me too. It was quite an honor, and as I said earlier, I value that this is a very different conversation. I value that very, very much. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely, and I appreciate it, man. You know, and I respect you a lot as an artist. I respect the fact that you stand for what you believe in. I wish people could take a few notes from that, and yeah, I wish you all the best, man. Any last words you'd like to share with the audience at all?
Well, the most important thing is to express my gratitude to the audience, but I've done that many, many times during this talk. So I guess it's all said and done. Mm-hmm. I'm here by the grace of the audience, and I've said that.
Absolutely. There we go. We have it. Mr. Tom G. Warrior. Ooh, thank you very much, sir, for joining me on Iblis Manifestations, and to everyone else listening.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys on the next episode. Cheers.